Welcome everybody, as everybody's popping in here. I'm going to get everything a second to load. Hello everybody. We've got a few more joining us in a second here. Thank you for bearing with us as we navigate these interesting technological waters. All right, so I guess I will get us kicked off. Thank you all so much for joining us. Can everybody hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? All right. My name is Dr. Brad Klein. I am the Associate Director of the SMU Human Rights Program, and this is the SMU Human Rights Fellowship Exhibition. Obviously, with the current situation, we aren't able to be together in person, but we are very grateful for the opportunity to come together virtually and to hear about the projects that these incredible fellows have been doing, to learn a little bit more about what the fellowship entails and to have a chance for some dialogue. So we will definitely have a chance for some question and answer towards the end. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days to join yet what I'm sure is yet another Zoom call that you are all joining, another video conference. So thank you for that. A little bit of background. So the SMU Human Rights Fellowship is an opportunity through the SMU Human Rights Program, and it enables a small number of exceptionally promising students to develop the skills and leadership necessary to impact real world change. We usually take about 5 fellows per year, so we can make sure to give them really in-depth mentorship and make sure the resources are there for their disposal. Any current SMU student can apply to be a fellow. So it's open to both undergraduate and graduate students. And we have both actually in this year's cohort. This year's cohort is actually, I think we've reached now 30 fellows overall in the time since the fellowship was initiated, which is fantastic. And we've had some incredible projects that have been developed along the way. And if you're interested, either now or later, I invite you to visit the fellowship website, which is just smu.edu/HRF, Human Rights Fellowship, HRF. And you can read about these fellowship projects and all the fellowship projects. There's a little bit of a snippet for each fellowship project that has gone before. And we're just so proud and honored to be associated with such incredible folks who are really doing their part to make this world better, more just, safer for all. So again, we will have a chance for some Q&A afterwards. And I would ask you to kind of hold your questions until the end. I'm going to admit a few more folks here. But in the meantime, we're going to have just short presentations about each one of the fellowship projects. So we have our 5 fellows, and be thinking about any questions you might want to ask. And we'll have a chance afterwards, if you'd like to speak your questions vocally and visually through Zoom, you're welcome to do that. Or you can also use the chat room or the chat function that's been enabled if you prefer just to write your questions, and I will moderate from there on out. So I think that's enough for me. I'm going to turn it over to Sana, who is our first fellow. They're going to introduce themselves and introduce their projects briefly. And again, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? My name is Sana. Thank you, Dr. Brad Klein, sorry, call him Brad, for introducing me. I'm a 4th-year student here at SMU studying human rights in English and Arabic, and I'm really excited to share my project with you all. I've been working really hard on it. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, perfect. So my project begins with a little bit of background information about me. I was born on the West Bank in the midst of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the conflict weighs really heavily on my heart. And I've always wanted to gain an educational background because I've always been so emotionally invested in the conflict, but I really wanted to learn about it from a classroom, the traditional classroom setting. So I took Dr. Atesh's class at SMU on Israel-Palestine, and it was absolutely incredible. And that was when I decided that I really wanted to partake in a project that would really help me delve deeper into it. So I decided to think about the power of education in shaping our minds on this conflict and how so many people have been geared in the wrong direction or have so much misinformation on the conflict because they have a lack of education in it. So I decided to really investigate the United States public education system and to see how students are being educated on it at the high school level. And in Dr. Atesh's class at SMU, we read from one of the greatest scholars on Israel-Palestine, Dr. Ilan Pappé, who currently resides in the United Kingdom. And through my fellowship and my SMU Engaged Learning Fellowship, I actually traveled to the United Kingdom, where I was able to sit down with Dr. Ilan Pappé for a week with him and his phenomenal PhD students. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. Since you mentioned Hamas, in the research that I've been doing, I noticed that so much of the pro-Israel curriculum is framed around this idea that the reason that peace hasn't occurred, or that Israel is not willing to implement peace, is because of the issues with Hamas and the violence coming from the West Bank and Gaza. So what would we respond to that?
Yes, I think you're right. Accusing the Palestinians of staging violence for the sake of violence is a very important element in Israeli propaganda. And I think the most difficult thing of challenging it is that you need time to explain to people where this violence is coming from. You can't do it in a soundbite. And you know, in this modern age of ours, media.
So that's just a little bit about my trip to the United Kingdom, which was absolutely transformative in how I understand the conflict. And this all culminated in me almost publishing this paper that I've written, which I'm so proud of. And this is just the first snippet of it that I wanted to share with you all. And I highlighted the part in the abstract that really does encapsulate what I've learned through this process, which is that in my paper, I argue that the United States has failed to provide middle and high school students with an accurate history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think we all know how great of a mediator the United States plays in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And if we are providing an inadequate education on the conflict itself, how do we expect to go anywhere with the policy that the United States creates? So I'm hoping that with publishing this paper and continuing to work to advocate for an accurate curriculum at the high school level in particular, that we can see some change in the way that the United States perceives the conflict, and then which in turn will transform the way that we write policy, since given that every peace plan that the United States has proposed for a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has failed. So that's just a little bit about my project. I did it pretty quickly, but I hope that you all can grasp how much this project means to me and how hard I worked on it. And I look forward to sharing this paper once it's published in just a couple weeks.
Thank you very much, Sana. Before we move on to our next fellow, I just wanted to, in the spirit of transparency, make sure to mention that we are recording this Zoom session. We're going to be using it to post on our SMU Human Rights YouTube and social media, so that those who weren't able to join us today still can have an experience. So thank you very much, Sana. And we're moving on to our next fellow now, who I believe is Cindy. Is that correct?
Hi, everyone. All right, my name is Cindy Hua. I am a graduate student over at the Lyle School of Engineering, majoring in sustainability and development. My fellowship project is titled STEM plus Z. So many of you guys probably already know what that STEM portion stands for. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that other Z part is kind of like the secret ingredient that I sort of pitched in my fellowship project, and it's teaching teaching STEM using zombies. Yes, so you've heard that right, zombies. So it's like, how does that even coincide with STEM? And that's my initial project before starting the Human Rights Fellowship, I guess warrants some of my background. So besides being a graduate student, I am also a STEM educator over at our local science museum, the Perot Museum, and I write curriculum over there, film hands-on activities for our guests that come to the public galleries, and then also for our school programs. So that's one thing that I do. And then I also am involved with a local environmental organization that focuses on cleaner air for DFW. It's called Downwinders at Risk, and I sit on their committee. And all these interests of mine sort of mixed together into a sort of a pot and kind of gave life to STEM plus Z. And so with STEM plus Z, originally it was formulated as something where students would go through this curriculum and they would try to find out and learn about each of those STEM topics. So for example, anatomy, engineering, and each one of those topics would have their own zombie associated theme. So you would learn anatomy through a brain dissection of a sheep. But instead of doing very segmented sort of activity and learning, what this fellowship project has tried to do is allow students to explore STEM and investigate what's actually creating and causing these zombies to pop up in this fictional city that I proposed to them in this scenario. And so during the first semester, which was in the fall, I partnered with Booker T. Washington, which is an arts-focused school in Dallas. Let me go ahead and share my screen and show you guys. And during that first semester, these students actually formulated their own experiments about what they might think is causing these zombies to pop up. And they were divided into two groups, and they kind of explored their own interests. So for example, the first group, actually both groups, were interested in learning more about water quality and how that affects human health. There's one group that focused on researching microplastics and another that focused on researching tap water. And they wrote about their whole experience and all the different results that they actually found during that whole semester, where they worked very, very hard. I'm so proud of them, and presented the data that they found through those research topics that they had. This semester, after they put in all their hard work trying to figure out what caused those zombies, I go and tell them, sorry, it ain't anything in the water, but it's actually stuff that's in the air. And so during this semester, that's where a lot of the air quality stuff, hence, let me try to get out of this share screen, where a lot of this air stuff, where I was mentioning previously, comes in. And during this semester, they are building low-cost air quality monitors. Can you all see that? So this is one that I had kind of fixed up in my home. They're low cost. They're low cost, pretty easy to get those materials. And it's like, how are you doing that when it's a virtual classroom? Well, great question, y'all. So one really cool thing about the Human Rights Fellowship is that you can plan for as many things as you can think of, but there can be stuff that comes and kind of like makes the whole project, I guess, unravel. But with that, there's great mentorship that comes along. And with that, we're actually going to be delivering these parts to those students and still continuing our journey to making low-cost monitors. So during the second semester is a more engineering focused sort of part to let those students be able to build these low-cost air monitors. And really the main core of this is engaging these students who are typically not in the STEM fields in STEM curriculum, but in more creative ways. And really engaging these students to become invested in these topics. Yep.
Thank you
And I
very
just got a tour of my mind.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And so again, I encourage the audience, if you have questions for any of the particular fellows or all of the fellows, to be jotting those down. We'll get to those in just a minute. So up next, I believe, is going to be Lamisa. Is that correct? All right.
Hello, can y'all hear me? Yes? Okay, cool. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see if it works. Here we go. Can y'all see it? Okay, cool. So my project's title is We the Students, which is kind of a patriotic take on We the People, because it focuses on students' rights. So this was really inspired by the student activism that I've seen in our current political climate, and also the history of student activism in American higher education that I've gotten to learn about. And so I've been really inspired with students and youth more broadly, kind of going beyond the wait your turn, thing that we're told by a lot of people in our lives, and just demanding the changes that they want to see. So my project took that in the form of a community symposium, which brought together student activists from colleges across North Texas. And I'm glad it got to happen before this pandemic. So I'm excited to share with you what the day looked like.
So the room cannot hold us. When we open the doors, you can hear us in the present, me right now and you right now. The nature of sound is democratic. It is we who are students, intercollegiates entered in interlocked futures, wielding truth to power like a passed down tool, retrofitted for now, ready to take on the work that did not end before us, and in hopes it will not end with us. So what is your passion? Who are you responsible to? Who saw the fire in you and gave you a match and taught you to make it roar? We see that light today, we recognize and love it, and that's why you're here today. We are all speaking with love, the kind of love that is our duty to the past and future, and a duty to the future which evolves brighter each passing day, not abstractly, but directly, because of each one of you here today.
So hopefully you got the impression that it was an inspiring and powerful gathering, which it was. And probably the most innovative part of it was the fact that it hasn't ever happened before. So there have been a lot of programs in North Texas and across the country that focus on specific issues and specific communities, but nothing that looks at students' rights more broadly and higher education equity more broadly. So it was a first of its kind gathering in our community. And it was also innovative in its approaches. So it was student-led from all aspects of the planning process. So all of the presenters you saw were students or recent alums, and students organized the whole thing too. And so it showed that, students can lead and we can lead now. And we also tried to implement different kinds of curriculum. So the poem that you heard in the background was actually written specifically for this symposium by one of our SMU human rights alumna. And we also use poetry and sharing histories of other movements to introduce different workshops. So one of the main products of the symposium was a declaration of students' rights, and that's kind of where We the Students comes in. We basically laid out our shared community vision for what higher education equity should look like. And I wanted to share some metrics for how the symposium turned out. So probably the biggest success and the most surprising success was the amount of funding we were able to raise. So we raised more than $18,050 from the ACLU of Texas and various sponsors on campus. And this was surprising to me because I did not expect to get this level of institutional support for a project about student activism. But this demonstrated that there are decision makers who care about moving similar goals forward. And it's more so about, letting them know that here are the goals that we share, and building relationships with them, and then strategically asking for financial contributions because they have money to support student endeavors. In terms of participation, we had more than 130 delegates who represented 15 North Texas colleges. We had 6 panelists who you saw, who are powerhouses in their own right. Many of them kind of founded movements on their campuses. And then we had more than 30 community orgs participate in our resource fair. So next steps include publishing the declaration that we drafted so that students who did not attend the conference can sign on their names, and then kind of take that declaration wherever they want to. So in the afternoon workshops at the symposium, school groups were tasked with coming up with action steps for moving specific aspects of the declaration forward. So the SMU group, for example, focused on affordability, and one of their ideas was implementing financial literacy workshops in ARROW, which is SMU's orientation. And probably the most important next step is mentoring and supporting future organizers. So a lot of students demonstrated interest in hosting the symposium on their campuses, which would be really awesome because if it rotates, then it would really be community owned. Though I do think that it's really cool that SMU got to be the first host of it. So right now I'm working on a website that will kind of serve as a historical document of this first symposium and also serve as a planning resource for future organizers. So to close out, I wanted to share a quote from a delegate from the University of Texas at Dallas. So Daniela said, "There are so many different aspects of students being represented today. Hearing everybody's stories and ideas coming together is very important. We're able to expand upon what we think a quality education and a quality life should look like for students, particularly at this crucial time." So my main task now is keeping the momentum going and building on our movement. Thanks.
And thank you to Lamisa. Up next, I believe, is Micah.
Hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen as well. All right, can everybody see everything okay? Awesome. So my name is Micah Williamson. I am an MBA student at the Cox School of Business. My focus is strategy and entrepreneurship. And my project is entitled Generation Wealth. And so I am touching on the issue of financial literacy and more specifically what that looks like in the Black community. So before I dive into the project details, I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of context. So this is a picture of me and my great-grandmother, Gussie Mae Thompson, or as my family and I called her, Mama. She was born in 1917. And like many other African Americans born during the early 1900s, she received a 5th grade education. And she spent most of her life essentially working for, cleaning for, and caring for white families. And with that legacy, there was not much for her to pass on to the 8 kids that she ended up having, or the 8 kids that my grandmother ended up having. And so as you can imagine, this is a complicated legacy, but I realized that actually my story was not very unique. And there are several young African Americans who want to be connected with their past, but also create a financially secure future for their families and for their communities. So my project touches on 3 issues. The first is that there is so much of our Black history that has been lost or forgotten or buried, which I believe often lessens the urgency to be proactive and make change. Because I feel like if we truly knew what our ancestors fought for or what they died for, that there would be action that would be being taken. Secondly, I feel like we need more spaces and opportunities to share our stories. Black voices need to be validated, they need to be understood, and they need to truly be heard. Excuse me. And lastly, I feel like we need to equip our communities with resources to generate wealth. And this is not just in our adulthood. This is equipping our kids in childhood with the resources to manage money, understand money, and build Black enterprise. So I'd like to introduce you to generationwealth.org. And what this site features are 3 key elements. The first is a toolkit that is designed to kind of fill the gaps in your financial understanding. So whether you're looking for budgeting tools or you want to raise capital for your startup, there are tools for you to access. Secondly, there is a film, which I thoroughly enjoyed shooting because it allowed me to connect with 7 Dallas community members. And they not only shared their personal financial journeys, but they offered historical context that shed light on some of the inequities in Dallas, as well as expert advice for people like me who are on their financial journey. And lastly, it features a timeline that essentially spans the period from Black people legally becoming people after they were considered property for so long. And so I'd like to be able to show you just an overview of the site. Can you guys still see my screen? Awesome. Okay, so when you land on the landing page, there is actually a preview of the film that'll be fully released on May 1st. But you can see the first 4 minutes of it, and it features interviews from the 7 folks that are in the video. If you scroll down, there are the links to the tools that I mentioned. So you can access the timeline. And again, it starts in 1865 and takes us all the way to 2020 to today. And then you can also access the toolkit. So when you land on the toolkit page, it asks you what brings you here. And so there are 4 different categories for you to access based on your needs. So for instance, if you're looking to build your own business, you can access these tools about growing your business. And lastly, the contact page. So if there's anyone, of course, we'll have Q&A afterwards, but if there's anyone that would like to get involved with Generation Wealth or just has access to content that could prove valuable to the project, there's a page for you to drop me a note. And that is Generation Wealth.
Thank you very much, Micah.
Yeah.
And I believe last but certainly not least, Marie.
All right, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Well, actually, let me introduce myself first. Okay, so hi, I'm Marie Jong. I'm a senior pre-med student here at SMU, and I am the founder of the Period Project. All right. Can everybody see this? Right. Period Project is a, oh, are we good? Sorry. Cool. All right, so the Period Project is a student-led initiative advocating for free and sustainable access to menstrual products in all the public, women's, and gender-neutral bathrooms at SMU. This is really important because providing free access to pads and tampons in academic buildings is necessary to ensure equal academic and professional opportunity. Menstruation is an unavoidable, necessary, and natural bodily function, and therefore menstrual products are necessary, much like toilet paper. Every person should be able to walk into a public bathroom on campus and find the supplies that they need to accommodate their daily hygienic needs. So we set out with 4 goals. 1, we wanted to collect survey data from the SMU community. 2, we wanted to work with SMU administration to provide free and reliable access to pads and tampons. 3 is assemble a toolkit for other schools to follow our lead. And 4, we'd like to assess the effect of our efforts. So we've had a lot happen this year. It's been amazing. We've had some amazing opportunities to engage with students. We've had a lot of public support, including Student Senate passing a unanimous bill in support of our project. And then the big thing that we've really focused on is research. There hasn't been research on menstruation and its impact on higher education on this scale ever before. And we really wanted to create some, I guess, scientific legitimacy to this issue. You know, it's something that's part of life, but we don't really look at in like a data format. And so I really wanted to create that kind of resource. So this is the poster that I took to a conference in February for the Association of Practical and Professional Ethics in Atlanta, and it was really well received. So we don't have the time to go through the whole thing, but I'm going to focus in on a few important points. So we surveyed 521 community members, and this one really stuck out to me because we found that most people don't have the products they need when they need them. So as you can see, when we asked if they had the supplies they need when they started their period unexpectedly, 54.9% said no. And that was a lot higher than we were expecting. Another noteworthy set of data here is that there isn't really a reliable place to go for the products they need when they need them. So I'm going to expand this one. We found that the most common response to that situation is that people would make a makeshift pad out of toilet paper. This is a major concern. Hygienically, this is very dangerous, and it's not something that we should be putting people in the position of having to do. The second most common response was ask someone for period supplies. Absolutely valid. But the third one was immediately go home to get supplies, meaning that people are leaving class and leaving work because they don't have access to these products. And that's really, really concerning. The third really noteworthy part of this research was that when students don't have products, they don't go to class. So we asked if their period has ever caused them to miss work or school while at SMU, and we found that 31.3% said yes. To me, that is absolutely unacceptable and a major problem that needs to be fixed. So these were pretty compelling findings, I think, and I'm honored to be able to share them with you. So this has been 2 years of work. The first year we started back in, when I first transferred to SMU, back in 2018, we started having conversations with facilities, and then last year I became a human rights fellow with this project, and it's been an incredible experience. So recently we pitched the project to, and our findings to SMU administration, and they're incredibly receptive and excited about the idea. And together we will be working really hard to gather all the necessary information needed to move forward. But the only remaining obstacle is funding. So we're working hard to make sure that that gets taken care of, but that is the one thing standing in our way at this point. Besides that, they're on board and they see the issue and they want to handle it. We just have to find a way to fund the implementation. So if all goes as planned, we anticipate a commitment to menstrual equity, ideally during this semester. And this would result in a formal plan to provide free and sustainable access to menstrual products in the public bathrooms on campus. This rollout would take some time, probably over the course of multiple semesters, if not years. But this level of buy-in is precedent setting and incredibly invigorating. And it's historic. So in the future, I probably should have shared that earlier. Oh well. So in the future, we really want to take this beyond SMU. SMU has the opportunity to set a new expectation. And so following our implementation, my goal is that we will establish a toolkit online that will be based on our research. The other institutions can follow our lead. We want to provide our research, our findings, our presentation materials, because there's a lot of movement among institutions to start providing menstrual necessities, but they often lack the evidence that free pads and tampons are needed and make a difference. And our data really provides that in a really clear and understandable way. So we're excited about our future as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Marie. And so now we would like to open it up for some question and answer. Like I said, you're free to jump in visually and vocally if you'd like. You're also free to use the chat function. As you're maybe wrapping your minds around some questions, one bit of piece of background I might offer would be, you probably have seen the diversity of the subjects and the approaches that are being used through these projects. And that's really by design. With the Human Rights Fellowship, we absolutely focus on showcasing the different ways that human rights mindset, human rights approaches can be applied to problems in this world. It also shows, I think, the quality of students that this university has. We're just very lucky to have really high quality, passionate students who don't just care about succeeding in the classroom, but really care about applying that classroom theoretical learning to real life practical change. And I'm just very lucky to be working with all of them. These projects have been fantastic. We've had incredible cohorts in the past. I'm so pleased to see that that tradition is continuing this year, and hopefully will continue next year. Applications for the next cohort of Human Rights Fellows are due April 15th. So if any of you all are in the eligibility criteria, I absolutely encourage you to apply. So I will, again, pause here and open it up for some questions. So anyone feel free to jump in with a question.
I have a question. One, you all were amazing. Thank you so much for presenting. But I was wondering if one or two of you could speak to some of the mentorship that you were able to receive around your project, and kind of where did that come from? Did it all come from the Human Rights Office, or did it come from other departments as well? So where did you get basically the support for your projects?
I can answer that. Initially, a lot of the resources did come from the Human Rights Program, but I'm sure if many of you guys are students at SMU, you'll find that finding people in the community who are willing to help students or support SMU is actually not very difficult. So we're very lucky in that way. So initially I did have some support that was immediately through the Human Rights Office, but actually a lot of the people that I ended up speaking with and that provided insights, these were people that I just reached out to in the Dallas area.
I can also jump in on this one as well. I had so many mentors through my process. Dr. Brad Klein helped with really pushing me to go out there and really find those people. Dr. Elon Pape, I know somebody in the chat was asking about the person that I visited in the UK, and his name is Dr. Elon Pape, and he is a phenomenal Israeli historian, and he has dedicated his life to educating students accurately about the conflict. So I sent him a message months before, and I just asked him. I didn't even think he would respond, and he invited me to the United Kingdom. So I think all we have to do is just reach out to people. When it came to faculty at SMU, if I was looking for somebody to answer a question on public policy, I would just go on Google and search SMU professor public policy and just send an email to whoever that person was. So we have so many amazing people on campus that can help us with almost anything that we need. So I really appreciated that.
I can answer too, since a lot of my mentors are on this call. So Dr. Klein definitely served as like the first line of defense because SMU Human Rights has put on a lot of conferences and programming, and so we have a lot of expertise in that area. Also Hope Anderson, who I could go to with any questions. I called Dr. Amy Soyoshi, who's on this call. They're the Dean of the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University, and we talked about the declaration and what priorities could be listed on there. Dr. Meje, who's the Vice President of Student Affairs at SMU, his division was one of our biggest financial supporters, and so he was also able to provide a lot of campus contacts and community contacts with other administrators, which definitely helped us recruit the amount of delegates that we got. So thanks, y'all.
And I can also just add a little bit onto that. So with my project, it's in the realm of education, and with my job, we focus on a lot of informal education. So one of the things that I really wanted to do with the STEMZ curriculum is have a balance of best practices in STEM education, but also incorporating more innovative ideas. So I reached out to some faculty members over in the School of Education at SMU, and they've provided really insightful mentorship and advice on how to try to balance those two whenever implementing STEMZ during the semester.
I can also jump on since we're all doing it. I really appreciated Dr. Klein's mentorship through all of this. I actually didn't know him very well before I became a fellow, and he's been an incredible mentor throughout this entire thing. And I'm constantly emailing him or texting him with questions, and I just can't express how wonderful of a mentor he is. And the other person that's been a really incredible mentor in this process is so I also work as a research assistant at UT Southwestern in the ethics department. And my mentor there, Dr. Heitman, has been a really wonderful source of advice for constructing the survey and, making sure that the research is all very, trustworthy, and can't think of the exact word, but she's been incredible. And so I can't thank either of them enough.
I'm seeing a question come in through the chat. This one's specifically for Lamisa. Could you tell us what are just a few of the items listed in the Declaration of Student Rights?
Yeah, I was about to copy and paste something, but I can say it. So the first article was basic needs, which covered things like housing, food, just making sure those things are accessible and affordable. We also focused on different like student populations, so rights for LGBTQ plus students, international students, undocumented students. We also talked about issue areas more broadly, so like racial justice, civil rights, which included what should our rights look like in terms of organizing on campus. So there were 15 articles in total, so I won't go through all of them, but basically each breakout group was tasked with coming up with a 100-word statement to sort of list their priorities for each of those issue areas.
Thank you. I invite other questions at this point.
There are a few more questions in the chat.
Oh, yes, there are. Looks like we have a couple of questions in the chat that I can see. Let's see. It says, Marie, did you look at the international efforts happening around periods and products which include young girls? And then to Micah and Sanaa, did you notice that American history is limited when it comes to people of color, regardless of the subject matter? So feel free to jump in on any of those.
Yeah, I can start on that. I am so glad you asked this question. Yes, I did look into international efforts, and that's actually part of what inspired me for this project. There are, I mean, obviously menstrual equity is a pressing global issue, and it has different effects in different places and different levels of severity. And there are a lot of efforts focusing on global activism to improve menstrual equity on a global scale. And there's been a lot of progress, and I am very inspired by that. But I realized that in my direct community on campus, this is also a pressing issue, despite being at SMU, where, you know, the reputation of SMU is that it's a very wealthy university, but even here, despite that reputation, like menstrual equity is a major issue, and lack of products is influencing people's everyday lives, even in that setting. So I wanted to have a project that could take action in my direct community.
Sorry, I was muted. In regard to the question that was asked to Micah and I about American history in general, in regard to people of color, that's actually a section in my research paper, is comparing the inaccuracies in public education in the United States on Israel-Palestine to inaccuracies on the history of African Americans in textbooks, and the struggle that America has had to be honest and come to terms with its history and articulate that to students in a way that's accurate and can result in change. So yes, I've learned so much, not only about my bloodline and how our stories have been miscommunicated, but also of others and other struggles in the United States. And it's been a really incredible learning experience for myself.
And just to piggyback on what Sanaa was saying, it was definitely a large task to take on, kind of documenting or analyzing the history of Black economics from 1865 to 2020, because so many of the records are scattered, and, you know, determining the credibility of the sources was also, you know, something I also wanted to be mindful of. But what you find is that there's not a lot of places where you can see the gradual progression of the oppression. And so, as I discussed with some of my fellow members or fellows, there was a lot to uncover going through the research, because obviously this is my history that I'm looking at. So there was just the added, I guess, trauma, if you will, with discovering a lot of the things that have been put in place and institutionalized for people that look like me to not succeed. So it was definitely a major task to dive into that history.
I'm seeing some great questions coming through the chat. I'm just going to start to pick some of these. I see one actually from Dr. Sherry Kunovich, who is the Associate Provost at SMU and has been a fantastic champion, I have to say, for human rights students and for the fellowship in general. She's asking, how else could SMU mentors, faculty, or administrators provide more support? And I think we might even open that maybe specifically to your projects or even wider for students who are doing projects like yours.
I can take this one since I forgot to thank Dr. Kunovich earlier. She and the Office of the Provost were another one of our sponsors for the symposium. So definitely financially contributing if relevant and appropriate. In my case, that was really helpful and my project wouldn't have been possible without it. I think also sending simple intro emails to make connections, because as administrators, you have connections to other administrators or other people who I don't have connections to. And so such a big part of getting the word out and recruiting is through networking.
I'd like to also add that, so I was an undergrad student at SMU as well, but I was in the Meadows School. And now I'm in Cox, which is the business school. And as you can imagine, there are very different dynamics in the different buildings. But what I found is that there are people in all of the schools that would like to support the projects, but there's just not a lot of visibility. So I think each of the schools become kind of siloed in their own operations, and the Human Rights Office is kind of small. So I think better communication amongst the different schools on campus to kind of increase the visibility of these really impactful projects could go a really long way.
And I would just add to that as well, I think we can see the power with each one of these projects of approaching problems through an interdisciplinary lens. And for each of these students coming from their various backgrounds, the power of being able to use different approaches, use their different knowledge bases in order to really come at the problems in employ novel solutions and not simply be using the old conventional wisdom to try to attack a problem the same way that it's always been attacked. I'm seeing lots of great questions come in through the chat. I'll just bring up a few quickly. To Marie, what are some of the plans you and the university have to come up with regards with funding and implementation? There's another question that's directed at Sanaa, but I think it's actually appropriate for all of the fellows. Talking about the emotional and personal connection to the issues and how you care for yourself, how you continue forward and find stamina with the depth and the pain and suffering that can come along with really dealing with the depth of the problem.
I can start on that. So in terms of funding, right now, the biggest thing that we are doing is over this year, I have been working to kind of survey our peer and aspirant universities and colleges to understand their level of availability of menstrual products on campus and how those projects came to be. And so right now I'm in the process of trying, it's a little difficult considering the pandemic. I'm trying to contact these schools to grasp how they funded their projects and how those products became available in order to better, I guess, prepare us to go through that process. I also have some meetings set up with administrators that I'm really looking forward to, and that's one of the topics that's going to be covered. And I've also applied for a scholarship through AmpFlow that would provide the first, so I have a 3-stage rollout plan that I have covered with facilities in terms of how we would actually implement the project. And so the first stage would be kind of some of the major buildings on campus that are common areas like Hughes Trigg, the library. And so I've applied for a scholarship that would provide products and dispensers that would allow us to complete that first stage. And so I'm waiting to hear back on that. But we're also open to donors, and we're just kind of working to see what else can be done.
I think in regard to Hunter's question, I think it's a phenomenal question, because that's something that I definitely had to overcome, was how to grapple with how emotionally invested I am in the subject. But at the same time, my emotional investment was the driving force behind it. So I would never say I wouldn't discourage you from really letting yourself feel those emotions, because they will become like your motivator. And throughout the whole process, like my love for wanting to see this conflict be resolved is the reason that I spent so much time on it. But at the same time, when I needed to step away from it, I did. And when I was struggling to understand something because I couldn't take away my personal, the biases that I brought into the project, I would consult with Dr. Klein and ask him what he thought, and my other mentors. And kind of first unpacking where I learned certain things and having to either unlearn them or shift the way that I see them to make sure that I'm putting together the best project that I can. I hope that helps.
And I can kind of add to Sanaa's answer. So with my project, I sort of glossed over it when I explained about the context of it. But a huge part of the air quality, it seems a little random, but the huge part of the air quality component really comes from some of the environmental justice issues that arise in DFW. So if you guys are familiar with Shingle Mountain, which is basically a 5-story pile of shingles over in Joppy, which is a freedmen's town over in southeastern Dallas. The group that I work with is an advocacy group that's trying to get rid of it. And a huge part of the curriculum not only ties the zombie and fictional portion, but it ties these very real environmental issues that people are very passionate about into the curriculum, and teaches the students not only just about this, but also at the end of the day, feeling compelled to do something about it. So it's not necessarily that I want them to join, those students that I'm working with, that I want them to join the Shingle Mountain Advocacy Group. But if at the end of the program, they feel compelled to do something and feel empowered to do something to solve environmental issues, whether it's their interest in climate action, whether it's interest in clean water, then at the end of the program, it's done its job. And that requires a personal investment, not only from me, but I didn't realize the sort of personal impact that the students would have and at the end of the program too. And I really thank Dr. Brad Klein for his mentorship in terms of trying to help me guide through those processes. So really appreciate that. And it's very meaningful, and it's very rewarding to see those students who are art students become emotionally invested in trying to solve problems and become more action oriented rather than passive.
And I think I could speak for all the fellows when I say you kind of reframe your exhaustion when you get the feedback from the people that you've been working with, or you ask a question that someone has been burning to answer, but no one has ever, talked to them about that particular topic. So a lot of times where I felt tired or overwhelmed, it was really just kind of reframing that exhaustion. And for me personally, it was thinking about where I am as a Black woman being an MBA student and building a timeline in 1865 when my ancestors were property. That to me was a lot of the fuel that pushed me to keep doing things. So you are going to carry that personal connection, but a lot of times it's the motivating force and really not what's tiring you out.
I want to be mindful of time as we begin to run short of it, but a couple of other maybe quickish questions and answers. One dealing with how did you overcome obstacles? And another one dealing with what are you most proud of when it comes to your project?
I can start on this. I'd like to address the part that I'm most proud of. I'm really proud of how the Period Project has changed. Like I said, I've been working on this for 2 years, and I kind of started it as soon as I, set foot on SMU's campus. And it has been one of the most pivotal experiences in my life, and it's changed me in so many unexpected and wonderful ways, and I've learned so much. And at first, it was just an effort to get a pilot program of menstrual products available at SMU. And it's grown to being a research project that I anticipate publishing a paper on in the near future, and like a full-scale rollout of products at SMU is now our goal, and we're working towards that. And we're very, very close to reaching that goal. And it actually now goes beyond SMU. That's been one of the biggest changes over this year. We're looking at trying to provide a resource to demonstrate that this is a necessity to all colleges and universities in our country, and show that this is something that needs to be acknowledged and provided, just like toilet paper, soap, and any other hygiene necessity that we have in the bathrooms. And so I'm really proud of how it has grown, and I'm very thankful for it, because I love it and I've learned so much, and I'm just very honored to be doing this work.
I can take this one too. I think in terms of challenges, something that I learned is reworking expectations and goals to be more realistic, because I think, you know, we tend to dream big, and sometimes not everything in terms of making something come to life, you can't necessarily tackle all of those things, but the things that you do decide to focus on, putting all that you can into making those happen, that's meaningful too. And I think that especially in like Western society, we tend to be really focused on quantitative success, like numbers, and focusing on like experiences that people are getting and the connections and relationships that we're able to build through our projects has been a way for me to find success in the process.
I definitely would say that I've developed a sense of more of a sense of pride in myself and in my community, because the timeline, even though it's just a timeline, it's probably the piece that I did the most research on. And so I really do have the sense of pride in the resilience that comes from a community that has literally faced blatant oppression for centuries, but that still continues to thrive despite that adversity. So I definitely would say I have a new sense of pride after uncovering all the information that I was able to see. So I would definitely say that's happened.
And I can close on this question. So with my project, I'm not only proud of the work that I've done, but I'm proud of my students who have come to really become self-motivated thinkers throughout this process of working with me. So initially, the goal was to empower these students to be able to, one, to compel them to do something about these environmental issues that they're interested in. But never did I think a student or an art student, multiple of them, would come up to me and say, I think I'm going to minor in environmental studies, or I think I'm going to minor and maybe double major in sustainability. And that is one of the most rewarding things that I think I could have heard as feedback from these students that I've worked with the past semester. So I'm very proud of the work that they've done and the efforts that they've put in to become world changers. So I'm very proud of them.
Well then, I guess I will close this up. I think it's especially important in this time of great uncertainty and pain for so many people to try to find some points of gratitude to remember. And so I certainly want to express gratitude to all of our audience members today. I see a lot of our human rights students, a lot of other SMU students, administrators, faculty. Thank you all. It obviously takes a community, it takes a village for any of these projects to happen. And we've heard the ways that that's happened for each of our fellows this year. And so I'm so grateful to be connected with all of you. Particularly grateful and want to make sure to express that gratitude to our fellows. This has been an extremely impressive cohort. It's been a real pleasure and honor to work with all of you. And I will love and look forward to continuing to work with you even as your fellowship comes to an end. But thank you so much for the work that you do, and know that it has made a difference for so many people in this world. We're just very lucky to have students like this to work with the Human Rights Program. This is the work that we do. I think their projects speak to exactly the type of mission, the type of purpose that we as human rights educators at SMU are trying to embody, to live out, to expand in the world. And so if you're inspired by this, please reach out. We would love to have you get involved with the community. If you have any questions for me or for any of the fellows, feel free to send them to me and I will get them where they need to go. But again, thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and thank you to the fellows. And I will close on that. But do look to our social media and to our YouTube where this video will be posted. Feel free to refer to it, spread it around. We definitely want to let more people know that this is an opportunity and that SMU is really pushing forward social change and human rights issues in this world at a time when it is very deeply needed. So thank you all. I will end the session now. Thanks for being here.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye.